Hello, everyone. Welcome to our IG Live. I am about to invite our very special guest, Edgar Arturo from El Comalito Collective. So, Edgar, hi!
Hello, hola, hola.
So happy to see you. I already love you, and I'm so happy that we're already friends.
Yes, it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and thank you to everyone who's joining live with us.
Thank you. So we'll just wait a few moments as people trickle in. But I want to start this very special conversation announcing that it's your birthday.
Ah.
Birthday, Edgar. I am so happy that you decided to spend some time of your special holiday extravaganza with us. So please, everyone, send some love to Edgar. It's his birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. So welcome, everyone. Thank you to the Latino Community Foundation Familia, El Comalito Familia. Yes, happy birthday. And on that note, please feel free to send reactions and comments and hearts as we go. This really is a community conversation. So whatever you feel like sharing, we're here. We're here with you. Yes, happy birthday.
Yes, thank you so much.
So today is June 30th. And apart from it being your birthday, it is also the last day of Pride 2021, right? So what does that mean? That means that today we might be seeing a lot of Pride flags everywhere. We might be seeing the rainbows in all of the windows, and tomorrow they might not be there, right? So part of the purpose of this conversation is to highlight the fact that our community needs our support and our visibility and our orgullo, no matter the time of the year, right? So even though today is the last day of Pride, Pride is all year round. So we're specifically talking about artists and entrepreneurs also because they have been one of the hardest hit by the pandemic. So we're also going to uplift that part of our community, right? And for me personally, it is honestly a privilege to have been supported and nurtured as an artist and as a creative from my parents. Hola, papi, mami. Besos a Peru. Because I think that the role of creatives is so important in social movements, right? We bring a different lens to it. And I specifically love this quote from Tony Kate Bambara, which is the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And we know that we definitely need more love and irresistibility in our revolution. So thank you, Edgar, for who you are, for what you stand for, and what you bring to the community, because it's really needed today. So without much further ado, I want to introduce the amazing Edgar Arturo Camacho Gonzalez, who identifies as a queer indigenous Chicanx activist and artist and poet, and I'm sure you have 1,000 other roles, right?
Lots of hats.
Yes, totally. They are the co-founder of El Comalito Collective, and if you are not following them on Instagram yet, please do so. Also, please follow Edgar on their personal IG account. And I also want to say, apart from your many other accomplishments, you are the first ever artist in residence for ACLU Northern California. So, again, Edgar, yes! I celebrate you, not because of your birthday, but also because of who you are. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super honored to be here and to share space with y'all. And yeah, I'm just really excited to share a little bit about the journey and also just have a conversation, about the arts and how folks can support.
Definitely. I love it. So on that note, can you tell us what inspired you to co-found the Comalito Collective, and what was the healing points that you were what was the pain points that you were trying to heal in Vallejo or occupied Ohlone land?
Yeah, this is a really great question, and I got asked this question a lot. And to be really honest with y'all, there's a little bit of tension in the answer, but I think that tension sometimes can be good, right? There's a lot of learning and growing that can happen from tension, and the reason why I share that is because we live in Carcan Ohlone land, Vallejo, California, mostly community of color, and as artists, we were invited to exhibit for a Dia de los Muertos exhibit, mi pareja and I, who co-founded El Comalito, together. And, you know, and that's our baby. It's our project of love, right? Of queer love. And I think that that's important to share as well. You know, but we were invited to show at this Dia de los Muertos exhibition, and we were the only two artists of color at this Dia de los Muertos exhibition. So we were like, okay, red flag, stop. You know, there's a lot to process here. And we decided, how do we model behavior, not just for our white allies, even if their intentions were not necessarily bad, right? But the actions were not the most appropriate. Like, how do we model the behavior, not only for our white community, but also for our communities of color, to understand what a cultural arts center for the arts looks like? And so we decided, let's open up El Comalito. And we did it within a few months, you know, and it was scary. We also were, you know, were unsure about what that journey would look like, but also Trump was about to get elected. Politically, there was a lot going on, and we really needed to reflect and the experiences by artists and artists of color that are clearly underrepresented, you know, and that's kind of how we got started.
I love it. I feel like sometimes just the whole universe conspires, right? And when it's time to create something, then it's time, and everything happens at the right moment. So congratulations on your baby. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So then can you share about how has COVID-19 affected the communities that you serve?
Yeah, you know, like you'd mentioned, Anna, like the arts community has been extremely hit by, you know, COVID-19 pandemic, not just the arts community, but also the Latinx community. So, you know, and it's interesting, you know, to talk a little bit about intersections. You know, we serve as El Comalito Collective underrepresented communities, folks who come from the margins, who live on the margins, mujeres, folks of color, Latinx folks, non-able-bodied folks, undocumented folks, queer folks. And we know that these communities often are who are impacted, not just by like COVID-19, but by hardships because of social inequities, both on the micro and the macro level, right? The local and the global level. So, you know, when COVID-19 hit, we had this beautiful 5 showroom gallery in partnership with Cal Maritime. And we were like providing workshops and teaching classes for young people, for older folks, teaching them how to paint and really giving them the tools, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, and for us, it's like, it's about like sharing and empowering folks to share their own narrative. So when pandemic hit, you know, unfortunately we lost that space just because it was an event space and we weren't able to hold gatherings. But not only that, like artists require these spaces, right? These mercaditos, art galleries, in order to like supplement income to show their art. And so we needed to figure out really quickly, how do we not lose this important programming for the community? And, you know, one of the things that I think is also important to note is that as queer people of color, as folks of color, as queer folks, as folks who live on the margins, we're resilient, we're strong, you know, and, you know, even though we are impacted by some of these tragedies, like we had to learn really quickly how to transition from a physical space to a virtual space. And some of the silver lining is that we got the opportunity to start working with artists that we didn't have access to before because of geography, and with school districts that we didn't have access to because of geography, who are now able to hire us and bring us into their classrooms from, you know, UC, Riverside, Long Beach down south, to organizations across the nation, to different school districts. So, you know, there's a silver lining there. And I think it's important to understand that we're like strong and we're resilient, you know, but also understand the opposite end, that Latinx communities of color and artists have been extremely impacted by COVID-19. And it's important now more than ever that we are uplifting and supporting our artist communities.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because it is true that oftentimes at the foundation, it's a dance between, we want to share what is actually happening in our communities and how much they're impacted, the people in the margins, but we also want to uplift our attributes, right? So yeah, we are resilient, we're hardworking, we're generous, we're creative, we're all those things, and right. So there's both sides of the story, and like personally, I think it's amazing to see how Comalito Collective was able to resurface, even though the pandemic was affecting it in such a direct way. Honestly, like people in the arts have been directly affected, but I think it's really a tribute to what you have created, because it's more than just a space, right? It's the collective, it's the community, it's the healing through support systems that really make the difference. So it makes sense, you know, that the people that are in your system are able to thrive nevertheless, regardless, because it is about familia, which is another beautiful thing about our culture, right? We don't let other people struggle alone. We're going to be there. We're going to hold their hands if we can. And if we can, we're going to give them anything we can, you know? Sometimes a little too much, honestly, but yeah, it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful what you have created again. And, you know, talking about the power of story, I'm a true believer that we can invite others to heal, you know, when we share our own stories, and how important it is to be the narrator of our own story, right?
Yeah. Like, you know, I always like to share with folks, like, no one knows your story better than you, right?
Yeah.
Like, nobody knows your narrative better than you. So it's so important that we tell it. For hundreds and hundreds of years, the history books have not been written by folks of color, by Indigenous folks, Black folks, by women, by folks who look like us, right? Our stories have been told for us. So art is just another tool that we can use to tell our stories. And for me, you know, when I was first introduced to art and learned the power of image making, it changed my life. You know, it changed my life completely. So like for us, it's now about like, how do we provide this tool to our comunidades so that they also have one more tool in their toolbox to be able to share their stories and their narratives, and that we take control of those stories, you know? So that power is given back to us, you know, not just in comunidad and familia, but also politically, also in systems of power. And I think it's important in order for us to be able to break down some of those systems of oppression, you know, that are causing the obstacles for communities of color and have been for hundreds of years, you know. So yes to art. I can talk about it all day.
Yes, I know. I can talk about this all day too. And when we say like break down systems of oppression, and you know, sometimes I have a problem with using the vocabulary of let's keep on fighting. We're in the fight, because it sounds so, uh, and you know, it sounds. But I think we've discussed this yesterday. How can we bring more joy? How can we bring more pleasure into dismantling these systems of oppression, right? And I think art can be a part of it. And about owning the narrative, I just want to mention this African proverb that our amazing Sherry Tang, who's a friend of the Latino Community Foundation Familia, brought to our attention, which is, it says, and I have it right here, until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter, right? So until we tell our side of the story, then the reality is never going to be, never going to be outside. So thank you again for just who you are. I love you.
Thank you. And what you said about joy too, Anna,
Yeah.
so important. You know, I do want to like emphasize that like through the work that I'm supporting with El Comalito Collective and showcasing art, you know, oftentimes as artists of color, we're expected almost to have our work live from narratives that are pain informed, trauma informed, and there's absolutely right, like there's anger, and we as folks of color and people in general, marginalized folks, queer folks, we experience a wide range of emotions, from the anger and frustration and all of the things that you know that come from that pain and trauma center, to also like the success, the joy, the thriving. You know, and I think that with the work I do with El Comalito and the work that we showcase, it's important to find that balance, you know? And I think that for me, even with my own personal work, it's so important, because for a long time, my personal work was also about coming from this place of pain and trauma. And more recently, it's been about centering folks, queer folks of color specifically, and their joy, you know, because I think that it's so important. And I think about often, like, what would it look like for me as a queer kid growing up, to have those images of like queer folks of color being able to thrive and be happy and survive, right? But furthermore, like, what would it have been like for my parents to see those images? Would that have made our healing so much easier, right? Because, you know, there is some toxicity and we are healing through that toxicity, but it would have helped even just the relationship that I had with my parents. And that joy just also acts as that counter narrative to misogyny, racism, xenophobia, transphobia, homophobia, all of these negative stereotypes that were fed by law enforcement, by the media, or by society in general in these constructs. Like, showing that joy acts as that counter narrative, right? Because history has taken actions against our existence. So to thrive in itself is revolutionary, right?
Yes, exactly. Like self-love as a political revolutionary tool, right? I think about Adrienne Marie Brown, who talks about pleasure activism and just how you say, how can we see our own people celebrate? Because in reality, there's a lot of celebration in our culture as well, right? And the point that you said about what would have happened if our parents would see folks like us in celebration as well. Like, we're over here trying to heal our own trauma, and there's so many layers of ancestral trauma that we still yet to be healed. So yeah, it would make the work easier. um,
Definitely.
and so before getting to know you personally, I was stalking you on Instagram, as one does, and I encourage people to follow Edgar on their personal Instagram. But I was specifically impressed with one post, and it was a series of your self portraits. And your caption just moved me so much that I asked for your permission to share it. And so I'm gonna read it out so that people over here can listen as well. And it says, "It has taken a lifetime to try and love myself and my body. It is through these paintings that I'm still healing from the attacks I grew up with, because in the work, I can show myself care, love, compassion, and I can spend the time I need to work through some of the pain and trauma. QT plus folks are at much higher risk of suicide, substance use, and mental health issues. I am a survivor of all three, and painting has been a huge part of my healing journey." So just, wow. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Yeah, it's interesting, you know, and yeah, and you know, now to talk a little bit about the personal work, it's, you know, I do a lot of self portraits, and again, I center folks of color specifically in queer folks, and you know, like, often I get asked why self portraits,
Mhm.
and you know, there's like uh, some questions that come up about, like, oh, do you want to be the next Frida Kahlo, or you know, or isn't there like an ego thing or a narcissistic component of like painting self-portraits? And the answer is no. You know, it's been a lifetime, you know, for as, and I'll just share about my story in terms of like my mental health, my substance use and overcoming substance use, and then also some body image stuff, and the loving of the self, right? Like, I grew up in a space where there were a lot of attacks on just who I was, or I am, right? And so when I'm painting, I get to spend the time that I need to spend with myself and caring for myself and reframing some of those negative things and telling myself through the painting that you are beautiful, that you are loved, right? That you are not defined by the pain and the trauma that you have endured, but rather, like, look at you now, right? And there's something so powerful about that. And again, going back to the narrative, like, I am no longer allowing someone else to tell my narrative for me. I get to tell it myself and then share that with the world. And I think that not just with this body of work, but for artists in general, right? There's so much healing that happens when creating work, but healing happens both ways, right? And healing happens when you're creating the work, but it also happens on the receiving end, right? Who is receiving this work, and how is that supporting their journey? And if it's uncomfortable for some folks, because of the subject matter or whatever, there's also power in the sense that these paintings, whether they're self-portraits or just centering queer joy, that if it makes anyone uncomfortable, the person that's going to need to walk away from that painting is the viewer. The painting isn't going anywhere. So, you know, and there's power in that. And I think that's, again, going back to the work that we do with Comalito, allowing folks to learn some of these tools, to share and empower their narrative, because your narrative is so important and no one can tell it like you can tell it. So everyone, go out and share your narratives with people, exist and thrive. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. I am so passionate about people being real humans, especially in social media, where sometimes it can be all rainbows and butterflies. And even though sometimes it is, the reality is there is light and shadow in our reality as humans. So the more we can share our human experience and our emotional journeys, I really, really have seen how we invite others to heal with us, right? To not feel embarrassed, to not feel that they're the only ones going through it, because we're all the same. We all have emotions. We all are way more connected than we think we are. And if we can see ourselves, each other as relatives, things really can start to shift in a global impact, right? So there's so many things I want to say on what you just shared, but yeah, just again, like self-love as an act of political rebellion, and also this idea of the ego or the narcissism, perhaps, that you might be questioning about self-portraits. It might be also part of our culture to shed the light out, right? I think one of the beautiful parts is that we care so much about the collective, about our community, that sometimes we go overboard, and we forget to shed that light into ourselves, and sometimes prioritize our own well-being, right? So it can also be through art, through self-portraits, through self-care, through showing up as who you are, from sharing your voice anywhere in social media and any kind of creative outlet that you think of. It's so important, because you make the community better just by being who you are, and you specifically do, Edgar.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you again for that caption. It was just so powerful that I really wanted to share it. And then, so Eduardo, my colleague, Eduardo, he reminded me, sometimes as a creative or as an entrepreneur, I forget, but he reminded me that from the outside, sometimes people think as artists as only using, their creative brain and doing the painting, the dances and the poems. But in reality, we're also doing the marketing, the photographing, the customer relations. We are our CEOs. Hi, Eduardo. We're and our accountants, right? So thank you for sharing that insight that you had, and for us to share this with the community in general. So Edgar, first of all, can you share a little bit of the experience of the artist? Like what does a day look like for you or for people that you know and you serve?
Yeah. So, it's different for everyone. And for me, and kind of just go back on the point that you had made about, artists needing the support, and that we are not just, in front of our easels or in our books, writing our poetry or whatever media, you decide to take, that we are the CEOs and we are the accountants, and that's also really beautiful, that there's some artists who are able to thrive in multiple worlds. And then there are other artists who are forced to have supplemental income because the arts aren't valued, because the arts aren't paid, because there aren't enough opportunities for the arts. And so it's important to know that there needs to be work done, right? That we need to continue the work in order to create more opportunities for artists. And in terms of El Comalito, like, we created that because we know that in order for artists to thrive, they need to be able to show that they've had solo exhibitions, group exhibitions, workshops, whatever, in spaces, in art spaces specifically. And we know that museums and art galleries and prestigious art spaces haven't historically collected art of queer folks and folks of color. That's only been happening over the course of the last decade. And even then, it's not because they just decided one day to be like, oh, I think it's time. Like, we have pushed and fought and demanded that we become part of these spaces, right? So I think that that's kind of important to share. And also for me, a couple of years ago, I decided to take the leap to say, okay, I'm going to dedicate some time to try and make my art practice happen. And there's a lot of privilege there, right? Like I have a classically trained partner who has been very supportive. And so there is that privilege there. But also for me to be like, I don't want to have regrets when I'm older and think to myself, what if I, don't try and make this happen, not just as the Comalito Collective, but also with my personal work, right? Like, and I've also been very fortunate to have a community who's been backing me and who's been supporting my work and my endeavors. I now have this residency with the ACLU, and I'm working with other galleries, and I'm working on my personal work and Comalito work. And so, for me, it's art all day, every day, from, theory to praxis, right? From conversations like this that tend to be educational and we talk about experience and narratives to praxis where I am in front of my easel sometimes for 8 hours a day, and also to have folks understand that artwork is work. There's also this false narrative that because we like what we're doing, that it's not work at all, right? Or that one day we woke up and we have natural God-given talent, and that's also not the case, right? Like I wish I was born one day and boom, I can create a masterpiece. But that's not how it happens, we work hard. We work hard to hone in our craft to make sure that we are becoming better artists every single day, and that our work is valuable. I invite folks to challenge themselves to go a day without art. It's not going to happen, right? Because of television, because of social media, because even the way that you decorate your home, it is everywhere. You can't look anywhere and not see art impacting your life some way, somehow, But then there's also the other end of it where it's like, for me, sometimes I spend 40, 50, 60 hours on a painting to know that someone's going to swipe past it in less than a second, right?
Wow, yes, 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 yes.
And that's like, sometimes it's like mind blowing to think about, but it's so true, So I invite you to give artists, the time. We deserve it. We work hard, but also to understand that it's work. It's work. Just like folks who work, their 8-hour shift or their 10-hour shift or their whatever hour shift at their job, they deserve to be compensated for that time. And art is no different.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. And as you said, yeah, we don't just wake up one morning and we're like, oh, we're artists. Like you said, like your own personal journey. It takes so much courage to jump into the void and to go for it. Yes, like Professor Gomez is saying, talent is not innate, but a learned ability. Yes, a learned and practiced ability, right? So much courage in really going for it full time yourself. And also so much courage in trying it out, even if you don't think you're a creative, I know so many people that have gone through art classes in school, and because they weren't able to do a specific task, and the art teacher said something, they shut off from being artists. And it's just not true, So if anything, I would also encourage folks here to go for it, to go for what they have secretly wanting to explore. And even though you suck at the beginning, that's okay. Just keep on going. You don't have to show it. You don't have to put it on Instagram. You don't have to, it can only be for you. Like that Edgar, you said, spending 40 hours painting your own self-portrait is so powerful. Like, and I can just imagine you almost in a meditative state, like brushing your own face with love. And how often do we have the chance to do that, right? We often give so much love for everyone else. Like, let's give that back to ourselves. So please encourage you to go find your inner artist. And if you want a very good book, it's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, who talks about nurturing your relationship with your own inner artist. So to wrap it up, the last question, even though we want to hang out with you the rest of the day, but I want you to go dancing and eating cake for your birthday. So should invite folks to have concrete ways in which they can support LGBTQ, Latinx artists in general, entrepreneur right now.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you. This is also a really great question. And also to touch on on what you previously said too. It's like, all, you know, shout out to all of the self-taught artists out there. I'm a self-taught artist as well. My undergrad, it was in sociology and in counseling. So, you know, I going into the art world was scary. So shout out to all of the self-taught artists. You can do this. And yes,
Yes.
grow, 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 learn, 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 practice, 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 and you will get better. And then also shout out to the classically trained artists too. You know, there's not one way to get to a destination. And remember that growth is not linear, right? Growth is yeah, it's not linear. Success is not linear. Your path is not linear. So don't get, you know, desilusionado, desilusionade for you know, your journey. Own your journey, and everyone's journey is different. And I think that that's so important to share. And then in terms of like how to support artists, how to support queer folks, you know,
Wow.
what was that?
Squad to encourage everyone to be an artist. I feel like something just happened. We're like, go for your dreams, people.
Yes, yes. And it just opens up even just new ways of thinking, of learning, of problem solving. So much. It's so, so important, you know, even if you're not wanting to become a professional artist or to make this like full time, explore it. You know, I often think about like traveling and the growth that happens when you travel, if you have the privilege of traveling, right? The privilege of experiencing new things and how that helps to shape you as a person. Like, why would you want to not experience new things and learn new things? So yes, by like go out and explore the world and explore art, and yes, you know, make yourself a more well-rounded person. And not only that, but for the folks around you too, right? Like if you're a parent or if you have young people around you, all of those good things. But in terms of like, to get back to the question, sorry, I went off on this tangent.
Oh, no, sorry. On that note of traveling, I also just thought to share, you know, traveling is such an opportunity for us to be back in our body. I feel like we have been oftentimes, we often stay in our heads, right? We think about everything. We're working, we're in the computer, blah, blah, blah. Like, how about just doing something that, you know, involves our own body, our senses? And I feel like coloring, looking at paintings, dancing, just invites us back into our body, and that is so powerful. Like you say, it impacts the way that you do life. I would invite you also to find ways in which you're in your body, you know, and that could be through art. But yes, okay, so back
Yes.
to and support entrepreneurs.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, now all of these things are coming up in terms of like, yes, like how, like, you know, pay attention. And, you know, when I teach art, I also am like, listen to your body. Like, do you feel tension? Where, like, you know, take deep breaths. Like, it's not just about the work itself, but like the mental health, right? And I think that with painting for me personally, and I paint a lot, and there's plantitas everywhere, you know, plants are very present in my work, and in my home and in my life. And, you know, I believe that, you know, the reconnecting with your body and the earth is something that colonization has attempted to sever, especially for like communities of color. And so, yes, when you're talking about like getting into the body, like there's something that happens with art that allows you to do that in a really specific and a really special way. So anyway, yes, go out
Yeah.
and pick up and do your thing, regardless of what that art form looks like, whether it's performative or performing arts, whether it's you know, painting or visual arts, poetry, whatever. Like, go out and do it. And then, you know, how folks can support, now to the question, right? How folks can support arts, you know. You know, I think that there's ways that you can do it using monetary media, and then there's ways that you can do it if you don't have the financial means, right? And sharing. So in terms of social media, like spending the time with the work, you know, again, knowing that someone actually took the time to create something. And especially right now with COVID-19, with all of the chaos in the world, police brutality, politics, everything just happening, it's so powerful to create something in a world that has so much destruction, right? Oftentimes we're taught how to break things down through academia or through social processes, but we're not taught how to create. And there's so much power in creating something, right? So spend the time with those creations when you see them on social media. Like, share, save, all of those things. And I think that that's important because even if you don't have the financial means to maybe support the artist by purchasing a piece or something like that, if you share it, someone in your social circle may see it, love it, and be able to support in that way. So there are those kinds of things. Invite artists to events, collaborations, pay artists. Again, you know, it's not something that we do as a hobby that we like to do for free. Like artwork is work. So, you know, invite artists to speak, partake, vend, do whatever it is, and pay them, you know, because again, it's work. So those are some of the ways that you can support. Yeah. And then also reach out to your artists, knowing the artists in your community, knowing that they've been hit hard by the pandemic, to be like, hey, how can I support you? Even if you don't have the means, just checking in with folks is so important, you know, but also remembering that we're resilient and strong and powerful, and like the plantitas, we're rooted.
Yeah.
And so
Oh
yes.
my gosh, can we have a shirt that says like the banditas we are rooted? Does that exist?
Yeah, we actually have them.
Oh, great! That's another way you can support. That's amazing.
Yes, yes.
Yes, 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 yes. Yes. Oh my gosh, I want to talk with you forever, Edgar, but I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much again for spending the time to join. Thank you for what you do, again, for what you stand for, and for who you are, and for taking that leap of faith and being the artist that you are. I'm so excited to continue to be friends with you and continue to see your art and your work. And for everyone here joining, thank you. Thank you. You are now part of the Latino Community Foundation and El Comanito Colectivo. And on that note, our foundation yesterday just announced a 5-year, $50 million initiative that is going to be invested in Latino-led grassroots organizations around California. And we're very excited. It's called the Latino Power Fund. So if you want to learn more about that, go into our website and Instagram. We have put it everywhere. So it's going to be easy to find. So Edgar, thank you again. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Lazos. And talk soon.
Thank you. Adios.
Thank you. Bye-bye.